Imagine having to find a single shape-shifting intruder inside a massive, like, 50-story skyscraper.
Right. Which sounds impossible enough on its own.
Yeah, exactly. Now imagine that skyscraper has 50,000 rooms spread across multiple continents, and the intruder is actively trying to cut the camera feeds while you search. I mean, that is the reality of enterprise cybersecurity
It
today.
really is. You're dealing with thousands of laptops, cloud servers, mobile devices. Finding a compromise is, well, it's the absolute definition of diagnostic muddy waters
Absolutely.
because the sheer volume of telemetry generated by a modern enterprise is staggering. A human being just cannot process millions of daily events, constant alerts, and, false positives without an incredibly sophisticated lens to filter that noise into signal.
Welcome to the Deep Dive. I'm your host, and today we are putting you in the driver's seat of one of the most powerful cybersecurity platforms on Earth, CrowdStrike Falcon.
And as the resident security expert here, I can tell you, think about the company that holds your health records, or like the bank that processes your credit card data. The security analyst defending your personal info is very likely logging into this exact console.
Yeah, so our mission today is to understand how top-tier professionals actually manage and defend these massive networks.
And we're pulling from a pretty technical stack of sources for you today. We've analyzed the official technical data sheets, the deep-level platform documentation, and we even dug through the gritty study guides required to pass the CrowdStrike Certified Falcon Administrator exam.
Which is no joke, by the way.
Yeah.
So we're giving you the roadmap of an actual analyst's journey. We'll start high above the clouds at the command center, looking at the executive summary and endpoint security activity dashboards.
Right, the 30,000-foot view.
Exactly. Then we'll drop down into the real-world operational workflows of a security operations center to see how automated responses actually work. And finally, we'll get into the microscopic details of the software sensors themselves.
Yeah, how they maintain their health and, what happens when a device just goes completely dark. Taking that muddy, chaotic data and turning it into a proactive, automated defense mechanism requires a very specific architecture.
Okay, let's unpack this. Imagine you are that security analyst, coffee in hand, logging in for your shift. The very first screen you are greeted with is the executive summary and the endpoint security activity dashboard.
And it's important to note, this is not a spreadsheet full of raw code.
No, not at all. It is a highly visual command center. You are immediately presented with dedicated information panels, managed endpoints, blocked threats, threat types, and remediation actions.
What's fascinating here is that the visual design is entirely intentional. I mean, the goal is to provide the current state of the entire global network in about 3 seconds.
Because you need to know your baseline before you can spot an anomaly, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And every single one of these dashboard panels is interactive.
Yeah, like if you see a number under managed endpoints that looks slightly off, you don't have to go open a new application or run some complex database query. You just click that specific widget, and the platform instantly filters the view.
It drops you straight into the network devices page with all the relevant search parameters already populated.
I like to think of it like the dashboard of a really incredibly advanced, futuristic car. If a check engine light comes on, you don't just get a vague warning. You literally tap the light on the screen, and you're teleported inside the engine block to look at the exact faulty valve.
That's a great analogy. And the psychology behind that interface is fascinating. In a high-stakes environment, reducing cognitive load is paramount.
Because when an active breach is occurring, every single second counts.
Right. Analysts do not have the luxury of time to manually correlate an IP address from one screen to a threat warning on another.
You just need to know what part of the building is currently on fire.
Exactly. And the platform achieves that rapid comprehension by standardizing the language of the attack right there on the activity dashboard. It does this by integrating terms from the IRA, ATT, and CK framework.
And for our listeners, the IRA, ATT, and CK framework is essentially a globally recognized encyclopedia of every known hacker tactic and technique.
Yeah, so instead of the dashboard just giving you a generic alert like malware detected, it translates the raw technical telemetry into the adversary's actual playbook.
Looking at the sources, the dashboard uses these colored donut charts and graphical severity ratings to categorize these attack stages. You see clear labels like machine learning or credential access or defense evasion.
Translating the data into those specific MITRE categories means the analyst instantly understands the adversary's intent.
Oh, wow. So you know immediately if the attacker is trying to steal passwords or if they're attempting to move laterally to another machine in the network.
Right, the dashboard gives you the why and the how before you even click into the alert to see the underlying code.
That makes so much sense. But Having that beautiful God's eye view of your network is great, but visibility is really only step one.
Knowing your house is on fire doesn't actually put the fire out.
Right. When those colored donut charts light up red and tell you an attacker is attempting defense evasion, how do teams actually deal with the chaos? Because you cannot have a human manually clicking a button to block every single malicious script across 50,000 laptops.
Oh, absolutely not. The volume alone would just crush any security team. This brings us down from the executive view and into the daily operational workflows of a modern security operations center, or SOC.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Moving past the dashboards, you drop into the incidents page.
Which acts as the central chronological queue for the SOC team. It shows the threat ID, the date, severity scores, priority, and any actions already taken.
But the real secret weapon here is how they handle the actual response, utilizing something called Falcon Fusion SOR.
Right, which stands for Security Orchestration, Automation, and Response. SRR is arguably the most critical component for maintaining sanity in a modern security team.
Because its fundamental purpose is to eliminate repetitive manual tasks through automated playbooks, right?
Exactly.
Let me try an analogy for this. Think of SOAR workflows like a highly paranoid, ultra-advanced smart home setup.
Okay, I like where this is going.
You establish a trigger, say the system detects the front door opening at 2 a.m., then you set a condition, the security alarm is currently armed. If those two things align, the system automatically executes a series of actions.
Like it turns on the floodlights, locks the interior bedroom doors, and texts your phone.
Exactly.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, that perfectly illustrates the trigger condition action model that SOR operates on.
The technical data sheets give us a fantastic real-world example of this mechanism. Let's say the trigger is that the Falcon sensor detects a vulnerability on an employee's laptop. The condition the security team has configured is that the severity of this specific vulnerability must be critical.
Right, so not just any vulnerability, but a critical one.
Exactly. Because the trigger and the condition match, the SO workflow automatically executes the action. In this case, it uses API calls to automatically create an incident ticket in the IT department's ServiceNow platform.
And it simultaneously sends a formatted warning message to the security team's Slack channel.
Yeah. Nobody had to manually review the alert on the dashboard, open a separate ticketing system, copy and paste IP addresses, and manually type out a message.
The automation handles the administrative routing instantly. And if we connect this to the bigger picture, this automation drastically reduces mean time to respond, or MTTR.
It cures a massive industry problem alert fatigue.
Yes, exactly. If human analysts spend their entire shift copying IP addresses from one IT silo to another, they become exhausted. Eventually, they stop looking up when the fire alarm goes off.
Which is a massive vulnerability.
It really is. Falcon Fusion SOAR handles the known, repeatable threats instantly, allowing human analysts to focus on complex, novel threats rather than doing administrative data entry across different IT silos.
And the automation can go much further than just sending Slack messages, right?
Yeah.
So our playbooks can be configured to actively contain threats at the kernel level.
Yeah, and by kernel level, we mean the deepest, most foundational layer of the computer's operating system.
So if a SO workflow detects a lateral movement attempt, say an attacker trying to jump from an infected laptop to a secure database, what happens?
The playbook can issue an API command to the Falcon sensor on that laptop. The sensor will instantly sever all network connections to the device, isolating it completely.
Wow.
Yeah, except for a single secure connection back to the CrowdStrike cloud so the analyst can still investigate. All of this happens in milliseconds without human intervention.
Letting an automated system make decisions on a live enterprise network sounds a little risky, though. I mean, what if the automated action is something drastic, like accidentally shutting down the CEO's laptop while they're giving a massive shareholder presentation?
That's a very real concern, and the engineers anticipated that risk. That is exactly why they built request for human input checkpoints into the SOAR workflows.
Oh, okay. So it basically hits a pause button.
Correct. Automation is fantastic for triage and initial containment, but high-impact remediations require guardrails.
Give me an example of a high-impact remediation.
Well, let's say a workflow is designed to execute a massive action, like revoking a user's IAM role. For our listeners, an IAM role is basically a user's cloud identity, and permission level revoking it strips their access to everything.
Right, that would be highly disruptive if it was a mistake.
Exactly. If the SOAR the playbook reaches that step, or attempts to network contain a highly critical server, you can configure the system to stop and send a prompt to an authorized administrator.
And it just waits.
Yet the automation will absolutely not execute that critical action until the human clicks approve. It prevents accidental network outages or massive business disruptions.
Makes sense. So we have this beautiful, visually optimized dashboard, and we have this lightning-fast, automated nervous system executing SR playbooks to isolate threats in milliseconds.
But all of these incredible automated defenses and rapid responses have a single point of failure.
They rely entirely on the endpoint agent, the sensor itself, actually functioning on the host device.
Right. If the sensor is compromised or disconnected, the whole workflow collapses. You cannot analyze telemetry that doesn't exist.
Which brings us into the gritty details of sensor health and maintenance. I mean, if I'm an attacker, the very first thing I'm going to do when I compromise a machine is try to uninstall the security software.
Of course, it's step one.
So how does the platform protect the sensor itself from being ripped out?
CrowdStrike uses a mechanism called uninstall and maintenance protection. An attacker, or even a legitimate user, cannot simply go into the Windows control panel, click uninstall, and remove the Falcon sensor.
That function is just completely locked down.
Completely. Even if the user has full local administrator rights on that specific machine.
Wait, so even the person who owns the laptop can't turn the security off?
Nope. To authorize any uninstallation or to change the sensor's service state from the command line, the system requires a unique, time-limited maintenance token.
Okay, how do you get one of those?
A senior security administrator has to log into the central Falcon console, locate that specific device, and generate this cryptographic token. You have to physically provide that token to the machine to unlock the sensor. It protects the protector.
That is a brilliant fail-safe against tampering. But looking at the study guides, they mention another specific state the sensor can enter, something called reduced functionality mode, or RFM.
Yeah, the RFM state is really interesting.
According to the documentation, if a sensor loses communication with the CrowdStrike cloud for 14 days, it enters this RFM state. When it does, it significantly reduces its resource consumption because it cannot receive policy updates or upload event data.
The 14-day RFM trigger is a foundational piece of how the sensor manages its own life cycle.
Wait a second, I have to push back on this. If the sensor is fundamentally designed to protect the machine, why does it deliberately reduce its own functionality just because it lost Wi-Fi? Doesn't entering reduced functionality mode make the machine more vulnerable at the exact moment it's isolated?
I get why you'd ask that. It sounds incredibly counterintuitive on the surface. But without cloud connectivity, the sensor is flying blind.
How so?
To understand the logic, we have to look at how the Falcon architecture actually processes threats. The sensor relies heavily on continuous cloud connectivity to evaluate behaviors using the absolute latest, globally updated machine learning models and threat intelligence.
But surely some local protection is better than reduced protection.
Not if that local protection breaks the host machine. RFM acts as a critical stability failsafe.
Okay, walk me through that.
Think about the mechanics. If the sensor kept operating at full capacity, relying on heavy heuristic analysis and machine learning models that were weeks out of date, the risk of false positives skyrockets.
Oh, I see.
It might observe a completely legitimate brand new Windows operating system update, fail to recognize the signature because it hasn't talked to the cloud in weeks, and decide to block it.
Which would be a disaster.
Exactly. Operating heavily without the cloud's real-time processing power could cause severe performance degradation, crash critical applications, or even blue screen the entire operating system.
Okay, the mechanism makes sense when you frame it around the machine learning models. It's like a doctor refusing to prescribe a heavy, complex medication if they haven't seen your latest blood work, because the side effects of guessing might be worse than the disease itself.
That's a perfect way to put it. First, do no harm to the endpoint's stability. It is a calculated trade-off, prioritizing host performance over applying aggressive, potentially disruptive, and outdated security logic.
But that 14-day RFM trigger leads to the logical next question. What happens to the device after that? What if a machine gets tossed in a supply closet or an employee leaves the company and that sensor just never comes back online?
This takes us into the realm of network hygiene and the life cycle of inactive endpoints.
The ghost ships. How does the platform handle these dead or inactive endpoints to keep the host management console accurate and clean? Because you definitely don't want your data skewed by laptops that have been sitting in a landfill for 6 months.
Right. The platform actively tracks these inactive sensors to maintain a pristine environment. According to the sources, the platform operates on a default inactive purge cycle, noted as a 45 and 90-day timeline.
So what does this all mean? Walk us through how that 45 and 90-day cycle actually plays out for the security team.
Well, at the 45-day mark of zero contact with the cloud, the sensor is officially flagged. Actions can be tracked via inactive sensor reports built right into the console.
So the platform is surfacing this data, basically warning the team that a device has been completely dark for a month and a half.
Exactly. Someone needs to investigate why. But the definitive, hard-coded purge happens at 90 consecutive days of no contact.
What exactly does the platform do at day 90?
At exactly 90 days, the host record is permanently deleted. The sources are very clear. It's removed from both the host management view and the trash container unless a custom policy has been requested from CrowdStrike support.
It's an automated digital spring cleaning. It prevents the security team from chasing these ghost ships devices that no longer exist, but clutter up the dashboard and skew compliance metrics.
Yes, the compliance angle is huge. But this raises an important question. I challenge you to think about the deep security implications of these inactive sensors.
What do you mean? Tracking dead laptops is more than just IT housekeeping.
Absolutely. It's vital security context. Silence is a signal. When a sensor goes dark for 45 days, it represents a critical blind spot in your armor.
Right.
The dashboard categorizes it as inactive,
Yeah.
but the analyst has to ask why it is inactive. Is it truly just a broken laptop sitting in a drawer waiting for a new motherboard?
Or did a sophisticated attacker somehow bypass the maintenance token, intentionally sever the cloud connection, and force the machine into isolation?
Exactly that. An unexpected spike in inactive sensors showing up on those 45-day reports could be the very first indicator of a coordinated attack.
Oh, wow. So they isolate the machine specifically so they can operate quietly, knowing it will just look like a broken laptop to the IT team.
Yeah, the adversary might be trying to systematically dismantle your visibility, taking endpoints offline one by one before launching a massive ransomware payload from those dark corners of the network. You have to investigate the ghosts before the system automatically purges them at 90 days.
That is wild to think about. A drop in telemetry is telemetry itself. You aren't just analyzing the data, you have to investigate the absence of data.
It goes back to navigating the muddy waters we talked about at the beginning.
Yeah.
You have to interpret the blank spaces on the map just as carefully as the red flashing lights.
Well, let's briefly recap the journey we've taken today for our listeners. We started high above the clouds, looking at the high-level clarity of the executive dashboards, where complex telemetry is visually translated into readable MIRE, ATT&CK adversary behaviors.
Yeah, standardizing the language of the attack.
Right. Then we drop down into the automated reflexes of SOA workflows, exploring how they use API calls at the kernel level to execute responses faster than humanly possible, while still using requests for human input checkpoints for those really critical decisions.
To prevent, accidentally shutting down the entire business.
Exactly. And finally, we looked at the granular health and lifecycle management of the sensors themselves, how they lock themselves down with maintenance tokens, how they enter reduced functionality mode to preserve host stability, and how the platform actively tracks and eventually sweeps away the 90-day ghost ships.
Analyzing the platform from top to bottom really highlights how interconnected every single layer of a modern defense system has to be. From the deepest kernel of a laptop's operating system all the way up to a globally distributed cloud dashboard.
As we wrap up, I want to leave you with a final forward-looking thought to ponder. As SOC workflows become almost entirely automated with AI and SO, and sensors manage their own health and life cycles, the role of the human is fundamentally shifting.
It really is. The platform is evolving into a completely self-healing, autonomous nervous system.
So the provocative angle here is, will the future cybersecurity professional act less like a detective hunting for clues and more like an auditor or governor overseeing a massive autonomous nervous system?
That's the big question. And if our enterprise security systems become entirely autonomous, does that eventually push adversaries to stop attacking the software altogether?
Yeah, if the technical armor is impenetrable, do hackers simply pivot and dedicate 100% of their resources to attacking the human being sitting behind the keyboards? Through, deep fakes and advanced social engineering?
It is the path of least resistance. When the digital perimeter locks down, the human mind becomes the most vulnerable endpoint on the network.
You might not be looking for the intruder in the skyscraper anymore. You might just have to figure out which employee willingly handed them the keys. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. We will catch you on the next one.